do want to thank you for joining us. This is Diana Arias with the Community Technical Assistance Center of New York at NYU's McSilver Institute, and I would like to welcome you to today's offering, Social Media Sexting and Technology Facilitated Sexual Violence, Education and Resources for Youth and Caregivers. Before we get started, I want to take a moment just to orient everyone so you know how to participate in today's event. I'm sure you're all familiar with Zoom at this time, but just in case, upon joining the webinar, you have been placed on mute to avoid any background noises that may distract others from listening to the presentation. If you come across any technical issues or difficulties during today's event, please chat to the CTEC host, who will be able to assist you. If you would like to activate the closed captions, you can do so by clicking on the toolbar button that says Show Captions. Also, we will have a Q&A portion toward the end of the presentation, but we are asking you to submit your questions or comments using the chat box feature at any point in time during the webinar, and we'll revisit those toward the end. At the end, we will also have a short feedback survey, and we would appreciate it if you can complete it. Your feedback and suggestions do help to inform our future offerings. And then lastly, the recording and slides for this presentation will be posted on our CTEC website, ctecny.org, within the next 2 to 3 business days. Now, this offering is eligible for CEs. So on the next slide, I just want to share with you all who is eligible. So again, as I shared, it's just for this live viewing. And we have 1.5 continuing education credits available for those who meet the following criteria. If you are licensed, present for at least 75% of the offering, and that you use the unique Zoom link that you received, so there's no sharing of links, and that you are using a computer. So attending this presentation via cell phone is not acceptable for the CEs. The registration will open tomorrow. We do have a set of instructions for you all. You don't have to worry about memorizing any of this. You will be receiving a detailed message with all of this information, the instructions and the links, again, within 2 to 3 business days. However, if you have any CE-related questions, you can reach out to the NYU Silver School via phone or email at silver.continuingeducation@nyu.edu. So that takes care of some of our housekeeping issues. At this point, again, welcome to today's offering, Social Media Sexting and Technology Facilitated Sexual Violence, Education and Resources for Youth with Randy Spiker. We are very honored to have her here. Randy is a psychological scientist working in the Power, Women, and Relationships Lab at Florida International University. And she does a lot of research really focusing on various topics, but certainly an expert in the area of technology-facilitated sexual violence. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Randy to get us started.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Diana, for that very makes it sound so much smarter than I probably am. So I appreciate that. Yes, thank you everyone for joining. I'm super excited to be here and offer this. I did live up in Western New York in Watertown for a short while. And so it's kind of nice to be able to give back because I really loved Western New York. So thanks for coming. As Diana said, my name is Randy Spiker, and I am a researcher and PhD candidate at Florida International University in the Department of Psychology. My focus broadly is on violence prevention and attitudes about violence across the developmental lifespan, so from very young up till very old. But my very particular area of expertise is technology-facilitated sexual abuse, particularly among middle school, high school, and then young adults. So I hope that this is very informative for everyone, and this kind of helps catch us all up because the technology landscape is changing so fast. And unfortunately, violence is moving very fast with it. So hopefully this can help you. On our agenda today, we're going to spend a big chunk of time talking about just what is technology facilitated sexual abuse, or TFSA. We're going to give some just working definitions so we're all on the same page about what we're talking about here today. We're going to then next talk about what are the consequences for young people who are experiencing technology-facilitated sexual abuse. It's going to look very familiar to some of you. We're going to talk about what does the state of New York say about TFSA, because every state is a little different. So we'll go over what national laws are out there and then what happens in the state of New York. And then we're also going to talk at the end about how can we support our clients and our families who have experienced or perpetrated technology-facilitated sexual abuse. We find, especially among younger people, they don't understand what they're doing or the consequences of what they're doing, either to the person in the images they're sharing or to themselves, because there are potentially consequences to themselves as well. So we want to make sure that we are supporting everyone who is involved in these situations. I also have some great resources that we can give to parents and clients or caregivers. And then I also have some excellent resources for helping if this has already happened and someone has images that are out there, to help them find some supports and also kind of control their image or even get those images taken down. So hopefully this is great for everyone. But first, let's do a little chat, thinking about your day-to-day work. What social media, like sexual violence or bullying via social media, have you seen with young people? You can drop that into the chat.
It's a great question, Randy. So yes, please let us know, folks, what you are seeing on the ground as providers. Certainly, it's important to find out what you're seeing. And we're seeing a lot of bullying. We're seeing some things on Tinder, Snapchat, deep fakes, IG harassment, rumors, starting rumors now online. Comments overall being made across all the platforms. Bullying, again, I know is one of the main ones. Sexual exploitation. Snapchat is coming up a lot. Sexting, images, photographs, fake accounts for harassment. So yeah, I'm seeing a lot of the cyberbullying, which I guess, you can think of harassment and online harassment as part of that. Let's see. Asking girls on chats to moan and act. Okay, so a lot of, yes, this very sexually oriented, sexually related behavior as well. Children pretending to be interested in other things just to be made fun of. So I think online obviously gives us sort of the availability to come up with however we want to present ourselves as well. So yeah, seeing a lot here. A lot of, someone was saying inappropriate photos. So yeah, I think a lot around sexually related issues here and across all these different platforms.
Yes. So as we can see, it is clearly very prevalent and it's already out there. A lot of folks like to think about technology or digital things as being an adult problem or something that's very rare. But as we can clearly see here today, it is super common and it's happening across the lifespan. It starts very young, unfortunately, for some folks. So let's just briefly talk about what is TFSA, or technology facilitated sexual abuse. It takes several different forms and we'll talk through each one, but online sexual harassment and cyber stalking, which I'm seeing quite a bit of here in the chats here, gender-based hate speech, the use of a carriage service to procure a sexual assault, virtual rape, the unauthorized creation or distribution of sexual images, which is called image-based sexual abuse. And there are a few things under image-based sexual abuse that we'll outline. And then the creation and distribution, either actual or threatened, of sexual assault images, which is what we call recorded sexual assault, or RSA. So jumping in individually, first we'll talk about online sexual harassment. This is typically gender-based harassment, but it might be other things as well. Things like inappropriate jokes or unwanted attention, or like constant harassment of asking for attention, unwanted sexual comments about someone's body or what they'd like to do, or sexual coercion, asking someone to do something or harassing them or telling them you're to do something if they don't do something. This is extremely common in adolescents. Anywhere from 2 to 30% of adolescents report being online sexually harassed. And those numbers only go up after age 18. Over a third, 36% of female high school students report being sexually harassed online, compared to about a quarter of boys. So there's definitely a gender imbalance. It is definitely more likely to be male on female, but not always. Men also experience sexual harassment. Just like offline sexual harassment or in-person sexual harassment, there is lots of evidence linking online sexual harassment to like real world mental and physical health outcomes that we will talk about. Next is cyber stalking, which I believe I saw probably some in the chat there. It's the repetitive and unwanted communication or contact to an individual through an electronic means, which might be like the internet. It might be through social media, like an app like Instagram or Twitter or Snapchat. It could be directly through email or any other form of technology. It's very common for people to cyber stalk through things like Life 360, where they're keeping track of where someone is. Men women are twice as likely as men to be cyberstalked. In 2021, 1 million women and 400,000 men reported it. And the vast majority of cyberstalking victims are under the age of 25. It is a very common adolescent and early adulthood behavior. Gender-based hate speech is dangerous speech, fear speech, or very extreme speech directed at an individual or at a group of individuals that are considered to be inferior based on some kind of core feature or identity about them or a demographic marker. Gender-based hate speech definitely encourages stigmatization and fear. It is also used to legitimize violence against people. We don't see this one as often among younger people, but this is one to be aware of, especially as we're talking about Instagram, IG, and Snapchat. Some really terrible things can be said very quickly in the spur of the moment that do constitute hate speech. This one's it sounds a little unusual, but it's the use of a carriage service to procure a sexual assault, which means taking your phone and using technology like social media or a messaging app to plan, coordinate, or solicit the sexual assault of another person, whether or not the assault actually occurs. So if a young person picks up their phone and is like, wow, I really wish this person would get attacked, like someone should go rape her. And then the person he's talking to goes and does it, they've both committed a crime. That is the use of a carriage service to procure a sexual assault. It sounds very out there. It does happen. And sometimes it is deliberate planning of, oh, she's going to be at the party or he's going to be at the party. We should take care of that. Those are things we need to be aware of that they may not even be aware is a crime. And also people just need to be aware that those kind of conversations need to not be happening. Virtual rape is a new entry into the world of technology facilitated sexual violence, but it is one that we are finding is increasing greatly, pretty much with every month. So virtual rape happens within the virtual world, within the metaverse, a video game, or other virtual reality simulation, wherein one or more persons using their technology forcibly performs sexual activities upon another person's avatar without that person's consent. So in 2022, a woman named Nina Patel had logged in using Meta's virtual reality goggles and gloves into the metaverse. And within 90 seconds, Nina found herself surrounded by men avatars that she did not know, who began harassing her. They began virtually grabbing her. So grabbing her from behind, grabbing her by the arms. And because she was wearing the gloves, she could feel it. It's just like you're there. Several men took advantage of her sexually. They groped her, and then other men avatars filmed what was happening, and then that was distributed. So not only was she sexually assaulted in the virtual world, but then that was disseminated out so other people could watch her or see her be raped in the virtual world. Multiple women have come forward since Nina in 2022, and this is a rapidly growing issue. We don't necessarily think about children in this, but children are very involved in esports and in online gaming. Everyone's got those little goggles that are getting for Christmas. It is something that we have unfortunately opened our children up to by allowing them out into the virtual world. So image-based sexual abuse is going to be kind of an umbrella term, and it's the creation or sharing of sexual or nude images or videos of another person without their consent. It can take a lot of different forms, and so we'll kind of move through those. I just saw a question pop up. Why was she in this space to begin with? People do it for fun. Nina is herself a journalist, and so she was just literally like, what is the metaverse about? And within 90 seconds, she was attacked. Other women who've come forward, they were gaming because it's a game element to it. It's a social chat service. I've even talked to therapists who have said virtual conversations are good for people who have anxiety. You struggle to go out of your house and meet people, maybe meet people in the virtual world first. And so there's many reasons someone might go into the virtual world. I can't explain the reasons why someone might feel it's appropriate to do such a thing in the virtual world to another avatar though, so. So some different forms of image-based sexual abuse. So the first is non-consensual sexting. You may have also heard this called a dick pic. It's the forced sharing of nude images via text or messenger services. We typically think about it, as the moniker suggests, as, you know, when a man takes a picture of his genitals and sends it to a woman without her consent. It's a bit of a misnomer. Women also will send intimate pictures of themselves to other people without any consent. Also, dick pics are pretty common consensually within a relationship. It's not uncommon to share nude images with your partner or significant other, or even among friends. People will take images and send it to their best friend and be like, hey, does this look good? Should I send it? So not all sexting is non-consensual. That's something to keep in mind, but it does happen. And if it is non-consensual, it is image-based sexual abuse. Unsolicited sexting is extremely common among adolescents and emerging adults, though we do see it increasingly across age groups, including up into the elderly. We think about this as being an issue of concern for heterosexual women or young women or teenage girls. It's also extremely common in the LGBTQ community, particularly among gay men. The next one is non-consensual distribution of intimate images, or NDII, which is the distribution or sharing of nude or intimate images or videos without the consent of the person or person in the images. This may also look like upskirting or downblousing, where someone like sneaks and takes a picture of you and then shares it with somebody else. As many as 10% of adults report experiencing non-consensual distribution of images, either that they shared or that someone took of them without their knowledge. And nearly a third of children under the age of 18 will report having received an image that the other person did not consent to. So this is extremely common. And we see it a lot on Snapchat. We see it a lot on Instagram, of children sharing images that were sent to them most often without that person's consent. There is also an up and coming version of NDII, where typically a man has sent or dick picked a woman non-consensually, and then she takes it and shares it to her entire list, which unfortunately that makes her also committing a crime. Non-consensual distribution is still illegal, even if you were non-consensually distributed to first. So if someone gets sent a nude and then they share it on to their friends, they have now just committed NDII. Sextortion is a big one, and we're hearing more about it. It's the sharing or the threat to share nude or intimate images or videos without the consent of the victim as a form of extortion. So the literature has well established that sextortion is very common, more common among adolescents than among adults, though that is starting to change. A growing number of sextortions really specifically target children and adolescents who are, one, more willing to be online, and two, more willing to exchange images as a form of social currency. It's very common to take pictures and trade them. It is a very small step from a clothed picture to a partially clothed picture to an unclothed picture, especially if you think you're forming a relationship or you think you know the person on the other end. So children are much more likely to be willing to exchange these kind of images. Regardless, some victims of sextortion never consented to the pictures being taken. Pictures may have been snuck in, similar to the upskirting or downblousing phenomenon, where a picture may have been taken without their knowledge, or a screen recording without their knowledge. And then the person then sends those pictures to them and says, I'm going to tell your mom, I'm going to tell the whole school, I'm going to send this to everyone on your Instagram friends list, and the sextortion begins. Sextortion might be for money, and it often is. They're asking for hundreds or thousands of dollars in exchange for not sharing the photo or video. Especially among adolescent girls, sextortion might look like, if you don't sleep with me, I will share these pictures with your parents, with your classmates, with your teachers. Or if you don't sleep with that other person, so it's a threat to get them to have sexual activity with another person, they will share the images and videos. So sextortion, we think financial is sextortion, but sometimes it is other things as well. In 2022, a 17-year-old named Ryan Last met someone online who was pretending to be a fellow teenage girl. No one he knew, but she was pretty, and he started talking to her. She lured him into sharing nude photos, and then attempted to sextort money out of him. He was able to send her about $300, and then he didn't have access to any more money. Facing what Ryan thought was just inevitable that his parents and his peers were going to find out. Instead of going to anybody, instead of reporting this extortion, Ryan was a victim of suicide that night because he was so ashamed and afraid of images getting out that he didn't want to face that possible reality. So we will talk about in the second half how sextortion, like other forms of IBSA, has different mental health consequences. This one is a hot topic, and you've probably heard about some cases recently, but we call them deepfakes or digital forgeries. These are the sexual images or videos that are created using artificial intelligence-based human synthesis technology. It's a mouthful. Which can either replicate or alter a person's features or their body to make it appear as though the victim, the person in the picture, is participating in a sexual activity that they didn't actually do. So a lot of times this is a face is transposed onto a body, or a body is transposed with a face. There is quite a bit of this going on, and it is crazy easy to do. We hear about female celebrities being victims, but men are not immune. Back in October, actor Pedro Pascal was deepfaked into some pornography. My teenager brought it to me and was like, look at this crazy deepfake. But if you were just like flipping through Twitter or Instagram, you would not know it was a fake unless you opened the video and looked closely for like blurred lines, places where the skin doesn't quite match up. Deepfakes are getting very, very good. And they're getting super common among everyday citizens. I'm sure many of you have heard about the case happening in New Jersey at, I believe it's called Westfield High School, where more than 30 young women were deepfaked by their peers to appear in pornographic materials, and which then was like virally shared throughout the entire school population. And they don't know. We don't know. Those may have even gone online as well. The school's not releasing a ton of information. And unfortunately, in New Jersey, it's not illegal to create digital forgeries. So there's not a lot of repercussions out there for that. At the same time, on the other side of the country, a very similar case was happening in Seattle, where I believe about a dozen women were also deepfaked into porn by their male classmates on a free app. So that's the other problem with this, is there are free apps that anyone can download, or there's paid apps, which are even better, that you can download to your smartphone, to your tablet, to your laptop to create these images and then share them back out. It is cheap or free, and it's very easy to do. And if your child is at all technologically fluent, they're going to figure it out in a minute. So that's what's going on there with New Jersey and Seattle. Streaming services like Twitch also make it really easy for like forgeries and deepfakes to be streamed online. And there is a burgeoning growth of deepfake pornography of both celebs and just your everyday person on the internet now, despite there being very explicit bans of pornographic material across platforms like Instagram, all of Meta, Twitter, Twitch, things like that. It still manages to make it on there. There's just a limited number of states that have laws against this. There's no real solid federal laws against deepfakes yet. But it is just as damaging for a fake image of your nude body to be put online as it is for a real image to be put online. And so we'll talk through some of the consequences of that. And then recorded sexual assault. RSA occurs when either a perpetrator or an observer record a person's sexual assault using one or more forms of video or audio recording device. This is typically a cell phone. It might be a tablet. It might be a computer that's set up in the room in advance of like a pre-planned assault and then is recorded then. This is a separate kind of IBSA. This image may or may not ever get distributed, but the recording of it is a crime, an image-based sexual abuse. RSA can be particularly damaging because the victim may not know that it was recorded until it goes out to the public. So we have seen folks whose sexual assault was recorded. They may have reported their sexual assault. They may have gone to the police already. And then later someone contacts them and says, hey, I saw this video of you online. And so it kind of reopens the trauma. It's a whole compounding factor, and it's something to take into consideration. It definitely is a compound trauma to find out that your sexual assault was, one, recorded, and two, that other people may have seen it, especially if a bystander did it and did the recording, which means that someone may have been able to stop. There's a lot of trauma that gets wrapped up in that. So we can see sharing intimate images is super common among both minors and adults. So in recent studies, as high as 54% of women have reported receiving an intimate images. Of those, 47%, nearly half, were unsolicited. And of those, 54%, nearly half, 46%, received their first nude image under the age of 18. So by the time a child graduates from high school, they are more likely than not to have received a non-consensual sexual image of some kind. 1 in 5 minors report consensually sharing nudes, that they willingly took a picture of themselves and shared it. And like mentioned earlier, 1 in 3 minors report receiving non-consensually shared nudes of other minors. It is not unusual in schools, particularly middle schools and high schools, for everyone's phone to go off at the same time or across the course of a day, and someone's nudes or someone's video is being virally shared throughout the student population. Specifically against children, we see that some things are more common than others. So image-based sexual abuse is a large category, is at 11%, all the way down to 2% of online commercial sexual exploitation. We don't talk a ton about online commercial exploitation because it is its own separate category and not technically what we would consider IBSA, because it is a different crime of child sex abuse material. However, it is really important to remember that if someone takes a nude picture of someone under the age of 18, that could be considered child sex abuse material by the law of this state. And we will come back to that in a little bit. So 30% of perpetrators of online sexual abuse against children were themselves also children. And 62% of perpetrators were known offline and real life, the majority of which are intimate partners, so a boyfriend or a girlfriend, someone who is already aware. Oftentimes it's also, I was surprised to learn, but also sometimes family members will share images that are found. Or if you have a job, if it's talking about an older teenager, someone who's working, it can be shared by a coworker. But very commonly, the people sharing your images are people that you already know and trust. So that was a ton of information. Thanks for hanging in with me. So let's take the second, let's chat first. If you have any questions, if you need any clarification about any of those working definitions, let's talk about that. And then now that we've flooded you with all this great information about TFSA, does this change the way you see violence in social media and those who you work with? Go ahead and use the chat box.
Yes, thank you so much, Randy, for covering all of that. A lot of information and scary, I will say, to know that that is out there. And as you said, that the literature really does continue to grow. So we have a few people really commenting. I didn't realize how pervasive it is. I know that you've sort of emphasized that a lot. I think some of us also don't really have the language around that and those nuances as well. So a couple of questions here. Was unaware of these sort of complex layers. Some folks have not been aware of it either because it's not maybe some of the work that they're doing. We did have a question around what drives some of this behavior. I know that you mentioned, you also work with folks that have been victimized or survivors also of this sort of online sexual violence, but also for the perpetrators too, right? What fuels some of that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm glad someone asked that question because we do work with perpetrators and we do talk to folks who have done it. Studies in the last couple of years have found that as many as 1 in 20 Americans will admit to doing NDII or sharing someone's images. A very large percentage of those are women who were dick picked and then purposely shared that image on without the consent of the person who sent it. But there's also a lot of men who will send the dick pic or will ask for videos over and over and over again, who don't realize necessarily that it's a crime. They're doing it as a bid for attention. When we talk to men who send intimate images without consent, a very large majority think that if they send their image to a woman, that she'll send something back. So it's an attempt to open a conversation, potentially start a relationship. And they do have some success. So unfortunately or unfortunately for those men, there's like a 30% rate of return. If they send a dick pic to a woman and a third of women will send a picture back, that sounds pretty good to them. And so the behavior is reinforced. All of that said, there are also people, typically men, typically younger men, who will do it as a form of harassment. It is a form of violence. It's a form of control. So they will send an image of themselves to typically a woman or a young woman because they have forced that person to look at their genitals. The consent was removed. The young woman doesn't have any way to not, like, there a thing opens and she opens her phone and it's right there in front of her face. There was no way to stop that. So it's a mixed bag, especially among adolescents and younger people. We find that it's not necessarily that they're trying to be mean or a bully. It's more the bid for attention and social connection. Like I said, pictures are often a form of social currency among the under 18 set. There's also the whole, it's a dare. We see a lot, especially among male dominated populations like athletes, where it's a challenge. It may be part of a hazing routine where they have to like get pictures of girls. And so these things happen like that as well.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So yeah, I mean, a couple of comments just didn't really realizing how pervasive it was, how coercive it can be. There's a couple of questions that have come up that I think we'll hold off towards the end, but just very quickly, Randy, if you can answer this one. What is the name of the video assault again?
The recorded sexual assault?
That might have been it. Okay.
Yeah, like if someone is being assaulted and it's being recorded, that's what we call RSA, or recorded sexual assault.
Great. Thank you so much, Randy. Really appreciate it.
All right. Yeah, if there's other good questions, I would love to answer as many as I can, and we will have some time for that at the end. So now that we know what's happening and how frequently it's happening, so what's happening for these people after they've experienced TFSA? So we're going to talk about some physical symptoms that you're going to see in young people who've been abused. You're going to see some emotional or psychological symptoms. And then there's some educational and professional fallout for folks who've experienced TFSA. So first, the physical. And if you've worked with clients who've experienced domestic violence or sexual abuse, some of these might look very familiar to you. Physical symptoms are reported like head and body aches, decreased or increased appetite. We find that to be particularly concerning, especially among young women and increasingly among young men, where eating disorders are becoming more and more common due to the influence of social media. So experiencing TFSA may spark or re-spark some disordered eating behaviors. We see it in lethargy and struggle to complete basic self-care tasks, children who struggle to get out of bed, they struggle to eat, take a shower, particularly as children get older and we move into high school, when you would think people become more aware of self. We see children that have been technologically abused kind of recede away from that. And then concerningly, we also see increased alcohol and substance use among adolescents, particularly who have experienced technology-facilitated sexual abuse, dangerous uses of alcohol and other substances as a coping mechanism or as an escape mechanism is very common among folks who have experienced TFSA. Emotionally, or what we call psychologically, these will also look very familiar. So anxiety and depression are extremely common among folks who've experienced TFSA. They are feeling a lot of shame and self-blame. They're also anxious that they don't know who has seen these images, or perhaps everyone has seen these images. And it's a constant, you wake up every day and you don't know if someone else is going to have seen these images. So you feel anxious, you feel depressed, you feel stressed. We see a lot of isolation and loneliness. We find that folks who've experienced TFSA, when they have the ability, will delete their social media, they will change their phone number, they will get rid of their email. They continue to isolate themselves further and further down to try and avoid, one, either additional sexual abuse happening, especially in cases of like sextortion, or they're isolating themselves out of the fears of everyone who may have already seen it and the shame and victim blaming that goes along with experiencing this kind of abuse. We see decreased self-esteem and increased feelings of objectification, particularly in young women between like the ages of 12 and 18. We find that once young women have experienced an instance of image-based sexual abuse in particular, they begin to self-sexualize and self-objectify. And so these young women may feel like now the only value that they hold, the only value they may offer to other people is in their bodies, is in sexual behavior. We see this also often in children who've experienced in-person sexual abuse. So this may seem very familiar if you've worked with any of those clients, but they begin to value themselves only in that image, only in those actions, and they struggle to break out of that. And unfortunately, as a result, or along with these, we see increased suicidality, particularly in adolescent populations where they feel perhaps unsupported. If you have students or clients who perhaps don't have the best home life, or they don't have a stable home life, increased suicidality is a real issue because they don't have anyone they can lean on. They feel alone and isolated. They may have been shamed at home. We find that probably at least 50% of people who report experiencing abuse, they will go and tell their closest family member. And about 50% of those, the first thing the family member says is, why did you allow that to happen? Why did you send that image? And the blame very much goes back on the person who experienced the abuse versus the person who perpetrated it. And so that kind of destabilizes it even further, increasing the chances that they may take that out on themselves in some form of self-harm. Socially and educationally, you will see poor academic performance. Grades will start to slip as they become to isolate, as they begin to stress, as they may take themselves offline and they're not perhaps on the school systems anymore. They're not turning in assignments. You'll see lower rates of academic retention and lower rates of graduation. They may struggle to make it through their grades or through high school. You'll see program or school changes. Children will drop out, or they'll ask to be changed because they don't want to be around peers who have seen these videos. We see increased social isolation, which is terrible for children developmentally. They need a peer group, especially in that 12 to 18 range. The peer group becomes as important, if not more important, than that family unit. And so children who socially isolate or who are socially isolated will struggle with all of those physical and psychological symptoms that we saw before. And then we also have to talk about the potential and actual loss of things like income, social mobility, and social stability. So this may not be the same immediately for younger children, but especially for our teenagers, older teenagers, and then even young adults who are moving into a transitional period. They may have part-time jobs. They may be working to help support their families. And when these images come out, if their boss, if their coworkers find out about them, if it's spread about their work, if their peers bring it to work, we've had victims who've lost their jobs or who've had to cut back and change jobs. We've had victims who've had to move. They couldn't even be in the same neighborhood anymore because everybody had seen the pictures and was giving them a hard time. So there's some real loss of income that happens at that time. There's also the potential future loss. If you go online and Google that person and the first thing that pops up as a potential future employer is nude images, it's an unfortunate truth that many employers will not look past that. They won't say, oh, this person was a victim. They'll say, oh, this person was immature or irresponsible enough to let these images go online. And so there's a potential loss of future income as well, which we know will affect them across the lifespan, particularly for low-income families, for first-generation college families, and for people of color, particularly young men and women who are Black and brown. We find that social mobility and social stability are very much affected by this. If they are not able to complete their school programs, if they change to a potentially lower earning program in high school or college, if they lose their job, if their stuff is online so virally that no employer will hire them, that's going to really hurt their chances of being upwardly mobile in society and potentially changing themselves from a lower income or working class income to something else. This also damages their social stability, their ability to have a stable home network, peer network, work network that will keep them safe over the span of their lifetime. So there are lots of real life consequences that are lifelong consequences that can come from experiencing technology facilitated sexual abuse before the age of 21. So let's talk about it. What's being done to respond to and to prevent technology facilitated sexual abuse? So as of today, there are 48 states and the District of Columbia that have laws explicitly criminalizing non-consensual distribution. So just one form of image-based sexual abuse, NDII. In those states, perpetrators can face jail time, they can face fines, and in some states, there's the possibility of having a sex crime on their record. which we know right off the bat can also be a huge detriment to your lifelong social mobility and stability and your ability to collect income over the course of your lifetime. The Violence Against Women reauthorization in March of 22 also introduced the first federal law that allows victims of NDNII to sue their perpetrators in civil court. So not only can it be a criminal concern where you end up with a misdemeanor or a felony, depending on the severity and the perpetration, but you may also end up having to pay money to your victim. In New York, there are 3 different ones. So in New York, it is a Class A misdemeanor to unlawfully disseminate or publish an intimate image. The downside of this is that the New York law does say that it must be intentional, which raises the bar on proof. So if they accidentally shared the image, it's no longer a criminal issue. So it is on the victim and on anyone supporting them to prove that it was done intentionally to cause harm. The second law is about digital forgeries, or what we call deepfakes, and this is a private right of action. So this is not a criminal action, but a civil one, saying that victims can pursue monetary damages in court within a 3-year statute of limitation for images that are disseminated without your consent. Some people will consent to deepfakes and digital forgeries. There is an industry that's coming out of that, but if someone deepfakes you into an image in the state of New York, you have 3 years to take them to court for civil damages. And there have been quite a few civil damages out there. In New York particularly, in 2022, a woman received $1.2 million from New York courts for her ex sharing her images. And the Cooper trial is ongoing, I believe, in New York. I have not seen it yet. There was a summary judgment in the plaintiff's favor, and we are now in the I can't think of the word, in the final phase where they decide how much she'll be awarded in damages. She's asking for 10 million. So we'll see what Dr. Cooper gets. And then just this last August, just to let you know, this was in Texas, but a Texas woman at the beginning of this fall was awarded 1.2 billion with a B, dollars, because not only did her ex share her images in DII, he also contributed to cyber harassment and cyber stalking. Including at her home and then in her workplace. He cyber stalked her at work, and then he also came in person to her work. That person had to move. She had to change jobs. It was a hot mess for her life, but the Texas court did award her 200 million in actual damages and 1 billion in punitive. So there is quite a bit that can be done civilly in court in some of these states. And then lastly, sextortion is a Class A misdemeanor in the state of New York. So anytime someone attempts to compel you or induce you to engage in conduct, which you have the right to refuse, if they're using nudity or sexual acts or images of these things, including threats for your immigration status, that is sextortion, and it is a Class A misdemeanor. Unfortunately, for this one, or for any of them to work, for the law to work, victims have to be willing to come forward. Sextortion in particular, the number continues to rise and rise and rise each year, but we also know that only about 40% of cases ever actually get reported. So it's much more common than even we know. Victims are afraid to come forward. They are feeling ashamed. They feel stupid. They're like, I can't believe I fell for that. It's my own fault. And so they don't come forward. And so there's no repercussions that can be handled legally in the state of New York for those people. So what does all that mean also here for us? Things to keep in mind, because we are talking about the potential of child sex abuse material here. To date, no minor child in the United States has been charged with a crime related to IBSA. So typically, if they're under the age of 18, police may show up, they may talk to them, but no child has been arrested or prosecuted for either creating or sharing images. However, persons over the age of 18 are open to charges, which includes sharing images as an adult that were taken when the victim was a minor. This is where the idea of child sex abuse material comes into play. If you were engaged in a relationship with someone under the age of 18 and you have nude or intimate images, and then you share them, that's child sex abuse material, and it will be treated as such under the law. It's also important, I made a note to consider the age of consent laws for sexual activity do not apply to nude or intimate images. People like to talk about the idea of a Romeo and Juliet law, that someone who's 19 could be in a relationship with someone who is 16 or 17, and that's not illegal. And that may or may not be true. But if you're 19 is taking sexual images of a 16 or 17-year-old, that is absolutely illegal. It is absolutely child sex abuse material, and they absolutely can be charged for that. And it's important to note that these charges or private civil actions can be undertaken years after the images were taken or shared. So even if those pictures are 2 years old, if the victim decides to come forward, there are still things that can be done. So while it may not be happening right this minute, this is one of those things that perpetrators don't think about. They're not aware of. They don't realize that this can have potentially very severe lifelong consequences for themselves because of all of this. So these are things that we need to take into consideration when we are helping to educate our teenagers and adolescents. So prevention is key. Like, the only thing that's going to help us out is if we can stop it before it starts. And the first big part of preventing technology-facilitated sexual abuse is holistic sexual education. And I know that's kind of a scary thing for some people. They don't want to think about it. American sex ed falls way behind pretty much the rest of the Western world. American sexual education, even the best programs, do not meet the UN standards for basic sexual health education. Even the most well-educated US students have just what we consider like a cursory understanding of consent and physical bodies and changes. Only about half of adolescents in America receive sex ed that meets the minimum standard just of the US goals. And if you are a marginalized or minoritized student, you're even less likely to receive any kind of sexual health education. We found that non-Hispanic Black and Hispanic males are less likely than non-Hispanic white males to receive any kind of formal instruction before their first sexual encounter, which is increasing their rates of sexually transmitted disease, HIV, unintended pregnancies, and it's increasing technology-facilitated sexual violence because they aren't even made aware of the realities of their bodies and other people's bodies, of consent, and of good digital citizenship. We find that exposure really encourages compassion, meaning most schools tend to segregate sex ed, particularly starting in middle school, and boys and girls are kept separate. But we're missing a huge opportunity here. Addressing gender and power needs to be done in these holistic classroom settings. Young men need to hear about gender imbalances and power structures just as much as young women do. We find that when we do talk about these things together, that we have great outcomes for our students, including sexual diversity, appreciation, reductions in dating and intimate partner violence, improving in their social emotional learning skills and their ability to communicate with others, increased media literacy and critical thinking skills. These things all happen when we have good holistic sexual education. We want them to have consent and refusal skills. So not only do they need to be able to say no, but they also need to know how to say yes in a way that is clear and affirming, and that the other person receives in the same way. The good news is students want it. They want more education. They want it interactive. They want more in-depth. And the other good news is adolescents in particular, and even emerging adults, are still very susceptible to peer pressure while doing their own explorations of themselves and their identity and their futures. So we know especially that student-led or peer-led programming helps. Group programming helps. These are all things that we can incorporate or encourage that will increase adolescent and emerging adult awareness of TFSA and reduce the likelihood of committing. We know that consent education works, especially in male-dominated populations, and especially in marginalized and minoritized populations. If they get clear affirmative consent education, particularly if it's peer-led, we see huge reductions in teen dating violence and domestic violence. So this is something we can work on. But that consent education has to include training in both verbal and nonverbal consent communication, because we have found that folks who are raised typically to be men and those who are raised to be women may have been raised to communicate sexually differently. We find that men are more likely to just do and ask for forgiveness, and we find that women are less likely to do that and may not be willing to give verbal consent. They may have some body language that says yes or no, but the young men may not understand body language. They may assume that no is a yes, which is incorrect. And so we have to make sure that we are training our young people on both verbal and non-consent communication and the importance of getting a full affirmative consent, including for sharing our images. We talk about consent for physical sexual activity, but it is just as important to have consent to take that picture and to share that picture. Speaking of pictures, we're talking about good digital citizenship. So prevention has to include education and good digital citizenship. Many young people do not understand the possible dangers associated with their online behavior. It doesn't occur to them. They may not have the critical and concrete thinking skills yet, especially when they're younger in that middle school age, to really think about who you can trust online and who you cannot. What's a good idea in the long run and what maybe is not such a good idea. Digital citizenship education has to talk about responsible social media and technology use. They have to know what's good to share online and what's maybe not so good to share online and how to negotiate that and how to critically think it through. We need to target our vulnerable populations. Who is at most risk of sharing these images? Typically, this is going to be young women more than young men, though young men do absolutely share these images. And they may be the ones who are already perhaps on the radar. Someone who is experiencing abuse at home, a student who feels isolated or bullied is more likely to share these images than perhaps the more self-confident and accomplished. It still happens among even those folks, but folks who are looking for a place to fit in, who are looking for community, who don't have a stable home life or stable peer group are going to be more likely to share these images. So we need to be targeting those folks to make sure that we're taking care of them. And we can't forget our parents and caregivers because everyone needs to be educated. A lot of parents don't realize what's available online, and they may not know even what their children are doing online. And so it's really important that we talk to parents and caregivers about being aware of what their child is doing out there online, who they're talking to, what apps they're using, what they've downloaded. And also our parents and caregivers need to know that should something happen, this is not the fault of a child. It's never going to be a child's fault that someone else abused them. But a lot of parents and caregivers, as we've seen, the first thing they jump to when they find out that their child has been abused is, what did my child do to put themselves in that situation? And so it's really important that we stop and talk to them too. This is just a brief list of some resources that I really like, that I talk to with parents and children about things to keep your children safe online. Some websites to talk about consent and consent at every age. I really like that one. The Institute for Responsible Online and Cell Phone Communication has lots of great tips on safe texting and app use. So I love these. And I believe you'll have these available so you can share these as well. That was a lot. So how can we support youth and the families of those who've experienced or perpetrated TFSA? Because there's a lot. And there's more folks coming forward. And we find often that folks who have experienced one form of abuse have also or will also experience another. So young children, particularly young women who have experienced technology-facilitated sexual abuse, are more likely to have also experienced teen dating violence, domestic violence in the home, or sexual violence in the home or among their peer group. So we may be dealing with a compound issue that we only see because of the technology-facilitated sexual abuse, but it's something we need to be aware of. So survivors are often feeling shame. They experience victim blaming, especially if there's already some other background issues going on, like teen dating violence or domestic violence, that is being piled onto this poor child. They may experience other symptoms that come along with it, and so we have to be taking care of it. So first, it needs to be developmentally appropriate. So obviously the things we would say or talk about with a 10-year-old are not the same things that we would say and talk about with an 18-year-old. They also need to be developmentally appropriate, considering any other factors that might be happening. Are they neurodivergent? Do they have a cognitive or developmental delay that may contribute to they're able to assist in their own healing or their ability to understand what has happened to them? Do they have past experiences of trauma? We need to be trauma informed because digital abuse is still abuse. And the embodied consequences of technology facilitated sexual abuse are pretty much identical to those of in-person actual sexual abuse or sexual violence. So we need to be really sensitive and aware that we may be talking about layers upon layers upon layers of different kinds of abuse that they may not even be aware is abuse. So psychoeducation is really important and can be a really useful tool with this age group. It's important to help them understand, one, what happened, like to kind of help them in a gentle way grasp what happened to them, and to help them understand that what happened was wrong. It was abuse. It was a crime. It was not their fault. They need to be aware of these things. And all of these things together will help prevent re-victimization. When we can psychoeducate, when we can give them good, solid sexual health education, when we can talk about digital citizenship and being smart and like self-protective online, we can help prevent re-victimization, which might mean it stops them from sharing images in the future. With anybody, it might mean that they learn to be a little smarter and think a little more critically about who they might share those images with. But it'll help us help them kind of move through that. Therapists report using cognitive behavioral therapy and narrative therapy as very helpful with those who've experienced TFSV. And we have found that group therapy can be extremely helpful in teens and young adults. Here we are back at that idea of peer-led or peer support. They may not want to talk to you. They may not want to talk to me or another adult. They may not want to talk to their mother or father, but they may want to sit in a room with 5 or 6 other girls who have also had their images shared and kind of process through how that made them feel, how they got trapped into it, just things that would help them process, and then how they move forward. Like, how did these other young women get past it? What did they do? What worked for them? I also like to talk here about restorative justice, which may not seem like it makes sense here, but we find that it's really helpful. Restorative justice can help both sides of an issue kind of like see the humanity of the other person and acknowledge the harm that was done. And so when it is appropriate, when it can be helpful, studies have found that using restorative justice measures can help a survivor move past and heal from what has happened. So that might look like getting a written apology from the person who sent the picture. It might look like an in-person apology if that's safe and appropriate. It might look like a perpetrator doing some other things that we'll talk about on the next slide, but anything that can help kind of restore the balance of power and give some power back to the person who's experienced the abuse can go a long way in assisting survivors in healing and getting past what's going on. And we do have to assist perpetrators because, again, many times, especially for young people, they don't even understand that what they've done is perpetrating a crime. And a lot of times that's due to a lack of information and a lack of communication. They don't know or are not capable at such a young age of processing through consequences to others, that they may not realize that it hurts somebody physically or psychologically. It hurts their peers' feelings. It may damage their peer in a different way. And so they don't think about these things when they hit send. And so it's important that we educate them on the realities of what happens with TFSA. And I would venture to guess that most of them have no idea about possible consequences to themselves, especially when we're talking about young children. It doesn't even occur to them that it can be a crime, that it's child sex abuse material, that there are real life consequences to themselves, which might just look like having a misdemeanor on your record until you turn 18 and then that goes away. Or if you get charged after you turn 18, this might become a lifelong issue. They don't realize that themselves or their families could be financially on the hook for many, many years to pay back. So there needs to be some conversation about the realities, but in a developmentally appropriate way. Again, we don't talk to a 10-year-old like we do an 18-year-old. And that really needs to be decided kind of with each individual client. Some are going to need different care than others. We are aiming at preventing further abuse and further perpetration. Like, it happened. Here's why it was not a good idea. Here's some critical thinking skills. And here's why we're not going to do that again. Like, we need to really work on educating about communication and consent so that we are preventing them from making future bad decisions. And again, restorative when it's appropriate and when it's possible. We find that the best ways to help perpetrators move forward from what they've done is to work in some kind of restorative manner within the community. This may look like helping lead a school assembly on consent in pictures or on digital citizenship. This may look like talking in a small group, of talking to other particularly young men of, hey, I did this thing and it was real bad, and here's how it hurt the person that I cared about. Here's what happened to my family. Here's what happened to me. Like, here's why it's not a good idea, guys. So let's not do this. We find, particularly among groups of young men, athletic groups, identity groups, if leaders will step up and have a strong public leadership stance of this is not okay and here's why, that young men are much more likely to fall in line with that. So again, restorative justice whenever possible. Cognitive behavioral therapy and multi-systemic therapies have been demonstrated to be effective when counseling abuse perpetrators, both online and in-person abuse. Multi-systemic, so we can tackle what's happening at home, we can tackle what's happening at school, just across the board, kind of surrounding them with support on all sides, so that they are also not necessarily feeling shamed or, you know, blamed that they made a stupid decision. They may not even be aware there was a stupid decision to be made because we have not educated our children thoroughly. So we need to be on board, and everybody needs to be on the same page. This includes educating our parents. We see parents that come in and not only are they blaming their children who are victims, but they're also blaming their children, they're perpetrators. How could you be so stupid? Why did you do that? Didn't you think about it? Well, no, they didn't think about it. They're teenagers or children. They didn't think about it. So we need to be taking these same steps to educate our adults about why children do what they do and how to help our children not make future bad decisions. Again, these are some great resources for educating our young people on consent, on digital citizenship, and on digital safety. I love when we can educate parents, but it's even more important that we educate our youth because they are the ones who are going to move forward into it. So anything we can do to help them with good ideas on sexting, social web safety, and how to recognize grooming. So many children don't realize that the person they're talking to in a chat room is not the person they think they're talking to. And they don't realize what's happening. They're just creating a connection. They're developing relationship. They may have traded some kind of social currency, and they don't realize they're being groomed for future bad acts. So it's really important that we provide children with the tools to be safe online in the most possible ways. These are super important, and I love sharing these. Feel free to print these out and flyer them everywhere for image takedown. So if you have a client whose images are out there, if the images were taken before age 18, missingkids.org and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children offer free image takedown services. They will help you contact the different websites, file different reports, and get the images stripped off of the internet as much as anyone possibly can. And it's free. For images taken after age 18, there's a great website called Without My Consent that will assist you in doing that for yourself. They'll provide you with links, with sample letters to write or emails to send. They'll tell you who to talk to at Meta, at Google, at Pornhub, at Twitter to get those images taken down. There are also paid services out there that can start upwards of $500 and more, depending on how many images and how viral it is, but it can be done for free, and Without My Consent will help you with that. For support, the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative is full of great information about TFSA and IBSA, image-based sexual abuse, how to handle it, what your legal recourses might be, things like that. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is also very fluent in handling digital abuse, just like in-person abuse, and they'd be happy to help. And the Federal Trade Commission wants to hear about digital crime. So if you have something that happens, if you're a victim of revenge porn or sextortion, the Federal Trade Commission and the FBI love to hear about this. They're tracking it so we can move forward on making better and stronger laws. If the images have not been put out yet, and this is really important, they have to have not been out there yet, you can stop your images from being exploited online at a website called stopncii.org. It's stopncii.org. You can go there and upload the images as a hash. So not the actual image, but as a hash. And they have partnerships with Google, with Meta, with Twitter, with Pornhub, with Twitch, a bunch. And they upload those hashes to those servers of those organizations. And then if the image, someone attempts to upload it, it automatically blocks it. So the image never makes it online. You can upload images that have already been online and they will help you try to take them down. But if you have an image that you're afraid someone will share, you can upload it and stop it from being shared at all, which is very helpful because we know that once something is out there on the internet, it is nearly impossible to get it off. So if we can be proactive and stop young people from having images exploited before they get out there, it is super helpful. So that is stopncii.org. It is one of my favorites. So to sum it up, because I know this was a whole lot to take in, TFSA, our technology facilitated sexual abuse, is a very real and a very growing problem for both minors and adults. The law does not keep up with the technology. Many people have already experienced at least one form of technology facilitated sexual abuse before they turn 18. We find it as young as 10, 12, 13 years old. Technology facilitated sexual abuse awareness and education needs to be increased among providers, among families, among schools. We know that consent education works, especially when we target it at male-dominated and vulnerable populations. If we give them the tools and the education, it helps reduce these signs of abuse all over. We know that many perpetrators are very likely not aware of the long-term consequences to themselves or other people of perpetuating TFSA. Again, consent education would go such a long way in helping folks avoid these kind of downfalls. And we know that providers and families need to be fully prepared to support survivors that have only experienced harassment and abuse in the digital world. While there is quite a bit of crossover, a lot of folks who have been abused in the real world will also experience digital abuse. There are just as many people who have never experienced like in-person domestic violence, teen dating violence, sexual violence, but someone has shared their picture. And it is very real. It is a very real trauma. And we need to make sure that we are treating it as such and not dismissing it because it's just a digital thing and not necessarily like in person. So thank you so much for listening to all that and taking it all in. There's a list of resources for providers that hopefully are helpful, and feel free to, if you have other ones, throw them into the chat. I'm sure folks can use them. I did see a comment in the chat that just popped up that it seemed counterintuitive to share it. What's great about Stop NCII is that the actual image itself does not go online. It's uploaded as a hash. So it's a technical thing where it literally it changes the image into a hash and it just goes up. And that digital code is sent out to like Google and Meta and all those places so that when that same code from the image pops up there, they can stop it. So you're not actually putting the image itself online. You're just allowing the servers to recognize the code that comes with that material. So I had the same concern. I was like, why would I upload the material somewhere? But you're not actually uploading the material. You're just uploading the digital computer code. So lots of references. There's tons of work out there. I'd be happy to talk to anyone about that. Q&A, please drop your questions in the chat, or you may have been doing it all along. I'm happy to try and answer as many as I can.
Thank you so much, Randy. So yes, there have been some questions that have come up during the chat or as your presentation was going on. So again, I just invite folks to drop any questions. I will say from some of the comments that were being made, I think this was very eye-opening for folks that are working not only with children and youth, adolescents, families, but also for caregivers, parents, immediate family members as well, right? To really give that foundational understanding of what is happening out in the digital world, because as you mentioned earlier on, this is the world that we are living in. So again, do appreciate that. So yes, we're going to turn it over to the Q&A. Again, please, I invite you to drop your questions in the chat box. The recording and the slides will be available and will be posted on our website, ctechny.org, within the next 2 to 3 business days. So the resources that were just shared will be hyperlinked there as well. So as was mentioned, you can download them for easier access on your end. Okay, so let's try to get through some of these questions. I know you actually just spoke about this on the tail end here in terms of how to support and more along the lines of psychoeducation and for individuals, but wondering if there was anything else that you wanted to share. So the question is, what do you find is the most helpful way to convey this to youth without using commonly used and unhelpful fear mongering language? So for example, just say no strategies. Anything that you've come across?
Yes. We find the most successful programs and tools are almost entirely peer-led and student-led. They're happening in group therapy, or they're happening in schools where it's student-sourced and student-led. They don't want to hear it from me. They don't want to hear it from their teacher or their principal or their school counselor. They want to hear from other students. So we find that to be really helpful. Maybe it sounds silly, maybe it doesn't, but it's really helpful if we remember to write it at their level and using terminology that's familiar to them. We see a lot of success with like the 3-minute soundbite. So you think like TikTok or Instagram, where they make a 2 to 3 minute video. Series of those little 3-minute sound bites, maybe mixed in with conversation, can be really, really helpful. They can process it. It moves quickly. It's eye-catching and it gets their attention, which is really, really good. And then you can intersperse that with conversation. You can watch the 3-minute video and then be like, what did you get out of that? Or how do you think that made a person feel? Things like that. Unfortunately, I do not off the top of my head know of any like directed or dedicated programs for that. We do when I talk to students, I go out and find those informations, or you can go to a TikTok channel or a YouTube channel and find those things. I don't know that a clinician has like created those materials specifically for use in a clinical office though.
Great, thank you. But as you mentioned, that sort of peer-to-peer communication, I think, is so key. In one of the chats, someone made a comment about asking youth or providing that education to someone that they work with, or even a child. I don't recall, but it was minimized, right? These sort of concerns that a caregiver, an adult, might have and say, look, this is what's happening out there, again, tends to be minimized. And I think it is, as you're saying, the fact that it's an adult speaking to a child or a youth. So how can we maybe try to attend to that? And any sort of peer-to-peer work, I think, would be fascinating. And hopefully that gets further built out. So thank you.
For sure.
Another question came in regards to sexual assault and men. So usually it's underreported by boys and young men as well. So wondering, how can we help make them feel safe and comfortable coming forward and reporting what has happened?
That is a great one, and it is a topic that's super close to my heart. And unfortunately, I don't have like a one answer. I don't think it's one answer. I think this is a community and a systemic issue. And I think a lot of that is going to come through caregiver support, peer support, and educational support. Like a lot of times our young men are raised from very little to squash their emotions, to not talk about things that happen. They are taught to be shamed if they cry or if they have strong emotional outbursts other than anger, that it's feminine and therefore that they shouldn't do it because they're boys. And that's unfortunately not something that can be fixed in an office visit. Unfortunately, that is a wider systemic issue. And so that's something that I think, if we talk about holistic sex education, we talk about gender disparities and gender empowerment, those are the kind of things that will start nudging the ball the right direction and pushing us to have that. It's really important, if you have a young man that you suspect may have experienced something, or that but they're not willing to talk about it, that we really focus on that there is no shame, that they are not at fault, that they are not less of a boy, less of a man because something happened. And that's going to be completely countercultural. Particularly in some communities and cultures more than others. And so we're fighting an uphill battle with young men. So all we can do is encourage them and remind them that good, positive masculinity does not look toxic. It does not look shameful. It does not blame them. And that they can be leaders, that we can take what happened and we can turn them into leaders that can help other men in their community, in their group. And they don't have to tell everyone in the whole world that it happened. They need to tell their support providers. If they have a parent that's going to be helpful, but not every parent's going to be helpful, but they need a support system. And so if we can help provide that support system for young men, they're more likely to come forward. When we talk about physical male sexual assault, when we talk about male rape, the men who are most likely to come forward are the ones who have a stable home, who have a good social support system, including other men who they are emotionally connected with and they feel safe talking to. If they don't feel safe, they're just not going to come forward.
Great, thank you. Really appreciate that. Yeah, so sort of really creating the space for that, and really acknowledging any of the implicit assumptions that we might have as a society. So yeah, appreciate that, Randy. A couple of questions or comments came in around sort of school focused, and I don't know if if there's anything that you can add around that, but obviously for folks that are working in schools, seeing a lot of this happen with their students. So are you aware of anything that schools are doing to sort of recognize and or address this problem, or any suggestions that you might have as to how to attend to it? I know you had mentioned earlier on that education, including sex ed, is obviously, sort of prevention is key. And any thoughts around what is being done or what can be done from a school perspective?
So it's a mixed bag. The good news is that there's Title IX in every public school, in any place that receives public dollars. And there are new Title IX regulations that are expected to come down in March of 2024. And the new Title IX regulations will include language that is explicit about technology facilitated violence and abuse, which is going to force schools to do something a little more about it in their Title IX training and their social emotional learning curriculums, things like that. Some schools are already doing this. When we talk about digital citizenship education, I believe New York Public Schools requires some digital citizenship education in their personal health curriculum. And so the incorporation of digital citizenship and those critical thinking skills in your social emotional learning lessons is so helpful and so proactive. So if you're already leading SEL lessons as a guidance counselor, as a school social worker, in these classes, if you can incorporate brief conversations or full lessons with the older kids about making smart decisions online, being safe online, recognizing grooming, but also how to be a good peer. Like, is it cool? Are you a cool friend if you're taking your friends' pictures and sharing them? Like, how would you feel? And really building that compassion and empathy for each other really goes a long way in preventing technology facilitated abuse in school situations.
Thank you. I've seen the word empathy a few times throughout the chat as well, right? So thank you for that. When you were speaking in terms of you sort of policies and laws, regulations, a question came in when you were talking that there are only laws in 48 states. And this is where it gets a little tricky, right? With social media and everything being virtual and remote. What happens if someone in a state that does not support these laws commits one of these acts on a person who lives in a state that does support the law against it? So 2 different states, 2 different sets of laws. What does that look like?
So what that typically looks like, from my understanding, and I would always tell someone to consult legal counsel, especially because some states are more or less easy to work with than others. But it typically is in the state where the victim resides. So if I live in I live in Florida, where there's revenge porn is a crime, and someone who lives in, I believe it's South Carolina, where it's not, does it, but I'm in Florida, it is a crime in Florida. So I can still file a claim and they will take care of that. The digital world is almost a free-for-all, and the law is not keeping up with the technology. So we definitely need to rein that in. There's also concerns of international law. The joy of the internet and the World Wide Web is that I can talk to somebody who lives on the other side of the world. And the downfall of the internet is that I can talk to someone on the other side of the world. And if this kind of thing happens, it becomes very difficult to do anything legally or monetarily about that. You can still follow all the systems to get your images taken down. You can still report it to the FBI or the FTC, but you may not be able to get any kind of legal recompense for that. But in the United States, for the most part, it's in the state where the person resides.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
I just saw one question come in here around any idea of bots or AI sexually harassing youth gamers or just gamers overall. I can foresee a future, unfortunately, where this may happen. And I guess going off of, some of the terminology that you used beforehand or gave examples of spaces that were not necessarily obviously created for that, but it increases the risk for some of this sexual harassment, sexual violence, sexual abuse. Any thoughts around that?
Um, Gosh, I have so many thoughts around that, and most of them, we just don't know what's going to happen. AI is a wild, wild west right now, and there's very, very little regulation or control around artificial intelligence right now. At least here in the United States, it's getting more so in Europe. They're beginning to understand kind of the damage or the potential danger of AI, but not so much here yet. I think we'll catch up in the next 5 years or so. Um, but it's a real issue. And I don't know who they're going to find responsible. If I create an AI that starts sexually harassing somebody, I don't know what they're going to do about that. So that's a great question. I think that's a really good question for our legislators and our lawmakers of what are you going to do when this happens? And let's be proactive and not reactive. I do know that at a conference sponsored by Meta and Google in France this fall, a gentleman who runs an AI management and takedown company out of the UK said that according to his analyses and what he's seeing online, that by the year 2035, at least 80% of women who have a social media presence will be deep faked into something without their consent. It may be sexual, it may be not. And it's not because necessarily, like, it's not that someone says, I would like a picture of Diana doing this thing. It's that I would like a dark-haired woman with curly hair, and the AI has been trained on all of our images. Because when we upload to Facebook or Snapchat or Twitter, we've all signed the little terms of services that says they can use it. And so AI is crawling the internet and training off of all of the images that we've uploaded. And so you may have a part of you or all of you accidentally deepfaked into something that somebody requests, because that's how the AI was trained. It is that serious, and it is coming that fast, and we don't know how to stop it. So let's be talking to our legislators hardcore, because I don't want my pictures out there, and I'm sure nobody else does either.
Yes, thank you so much, I think, for bringing that to the forefront, because there's just so much happening right now in terms of youth mental health crisis. And I think we're just trying to catch up, right? As you said, technology, social media, AI, all of this is happening at a pace that we can't even fathom what could potentially happen. So I appreciate your sort of call to action on a larger systemic policy level as well. So much information here, Andy. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. So another question that came in, again, as you mentioned, social media is around. We post pictures of ourselves or friends or family members. A question came in around family members. So specifically, is it considered sexual violence when a family member, for example, a parent, a caregiver, post a picture of their child in the bathtub or a pool without the child's knowledge, and the child maybe now might be a teen or adult? What are the nuances around that?
That's another really good question, and that's going to vary legally state by state. Personally, I don't think we should be posting pictures of our children, especially like the cute little naked in the bathtub pictures. Like, please stop, please don't do that. If you see it, please, like, have them take it down. Over and above the fact that it's a huge invasion of that eventual adult child's privacy, but also because of the AI issue and other things online, we do not want to feed the machine terrible things. But in many or all states, children are the property of their parents, unless something crazy has happened and the court takes that right away. And so parents, as a general rule, have the right to post whatever they want of their minor children. So a minor child can request after the fact to have those pictures taken down. I've even seen cases where a minor child has aged out or been emancipated and then had a court order for pictures to be taken down that their parents posted. Content creation, we're starting to see now the generation of children that were raised online as content creation has come of age, and now they're taking their parents to court to have all of that content featuring them taken down off the internet, off of YouTube and things like that. But it's not a crime. unfortunately, because we treat children as property so much in this country.
Thank you. And in the interest of time, I want to just get one last question in that actually came in now, because I have been seeing throughout the chat that folks have been sharing, I had this situation with someone that I was working with, and we contacted officials or police and whatnot. The question that came in recently is, do you find that law enforcement is taking this seriously?
Yes and no. And it is a department by department basis. So we are finding, for instance, like FIU's internal police force that's here on campus takes it very seriously. If I were to take a student down to victim services and then over to our police department, they take it very seriously. They take official reports, they go talk to everybody. But if I go outside of that to potentially an office here in Miami-Dade, I may not get the same response. So it is very much officer to officer. And this is another one of those systemic changes. Like, our officers need to be educated. You will find that some departments have gone out of their way to educate their officers about technology facilitated abuse, and they are very responsive and very helpful. And you will find just as many officers who will victim blame you when you walk in the door. And many times those are the same officers that would have victim blamed for an in-person sexual assault as well. So unfortunately, you kind of have to feel it out. I think this is, again, one of those things that will change as new laws come on the books, as things become even more prevalent, as cases become more and more public, as more and more women sue for and win millions of dollars. I think law enforcement will begin to take it more seriously, but it's not everybody all the time just yet. Good question.
Thank you. So again, I do want to be respectful of time. So Randy, thank you again. I do want to invite folks for other future offerings that we are having. We have a CTech podcast, Voices from the Field, a new episode being released tomorrow. And later this week, telehealth and ADD offering. So again, in terms of the offerings, we really try to target as many different and varied topics that you all are seeing on the ground. Certainly today's offering, again, thank you, Randy. Very informative, very eye-opening, not just for providers, but as we were saying, for individuals that know young children or caregivers of young children. So I do want to say thank you to you. For folks also on the line, you just saw our host throw in a link to a feedback survey. Again, really encourage you to fill that out. As I mentioned earlier on, it does help to inform future offerings. So your thoughts around anything else related around social media that you feel might be helpful to support children, youth, and families that you are working with, or any other topics that are of interest to you, please take the time to fill out that survey. Any past offerings that you might want to take a look at, tools and resource, please visit our website at ctechny.org. And if there are any questions, certainly please feel free to reach out to us. Again, on behalf of CTech, thank you again, Randy. A lot of thank yous coming in from the audience members. And to you all who have joined us, thank you and have a great rest of your week. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.